Election night coverage. I'm Jackie Ray. Throughout the evening, we will bring you updates as election numbers start rolling in and bring you live updates from the election night parties of both mayoral candidates, Rex Richardson and Susie Price. I recently sat down with both candidates and asked them about the number one issue for voters, and that is homelessness. Councilwoman Susie Price says the key to addressing this issue is a robust outreach system.
There are a lot of nonprofits that offer outreach and connect you to a service provider that offers temporary housing. Okay. Now, we've been working really closely with landlords in the city to get them to a point where they're willing to trust the city and accept housing vouchers. And we're starting to see a lot of progress. In fact, on Sunday, we had a forum, a mayor's forum at church in East Long Beach.
Okay.
And one of the questions to both candidates was posed by a man by the name of Clark. And he is homeless and he has a housing voucher. Mm-hmm. And he asked us some questions about housing. I went up to him after the meeting, gave him my cell phone number. He called me that night, and today I connected him with housing, one-bedroom apartment. They're going to accept his housing voucher, and it was me reaching out to a group of housing providers that came to my workshop on accepting Section 8 vouchers, and they're willing to do it. So I connected his case manager from Mental Health America, and Clark has a son named Spencer, and he showed us all a picture of Spencer in the forum. So Spencer and Clark are going to have a home. So it's not, and Clark went through services through St. Luke's. Okay. And was able to kind of stabilize through the support of St. Luke's and had transitional housing, but does not have permanent housing. Gotcha. So for me, outreach leads to transitional housing and services. They will not succeed in housing without supportive services, without a caseworker who's advocating for them. You know, we have a woman who was experiencing homelessness in the east side of Long Beach, and she would often be without her pants and lots of complaints from residents. And she ended up getting arrested for trespass, and she got arrested for trespass during COVID. So the jails have currently even still a requirement that if you get taken in, there is a quarantine upon intake for 10 days. So you don't get to go see your judge in 48 hours if you're brought in. And for whatever reason, you're not booked and released. Most crimes, you're booked and released, most misdemeanors. But people that have a warrant will get kept until their arraignment. Well, she was quarantined for 10 days. As soon as we found out she was there, I contacted the city prosecutor's office. We worked with the social worker they have on their team there. We worked with the jail clinician. The jail clinician met with her. She ended up getting COVID during those 10 days, so she was quarantined for an additional 10 days. What that did was it gave her 20 days to work with the jail clinician who determined that she had a mental illness and get her medicated. By the time she got in front of the judge, she was medicated. She was released from court to her caseworker. Her caseworker took her to a group home. She continued to take her daily medication. She got a job at McDonald's. She was doing great. Mm-hmm. She transitioned to independent living. She fell off of her medication, landed back on 2nd Street, doing all the same things. So then they arrested her again. She had some warrants out of Orange County. They brought her there. I sent the healthcare department to the jail to interview her and talk to her about services. She wasn't interested. She didn't want any services. She didn't have enough time to be assessed and get, the full psychological assessment. They weren't going to let her go, though, because she had a warrant out of San Bernardino.
Right.
So this is all for one person. Right. When she went to San Bernardino, she accepted a service in San Bernardino. So that just goes to show you how much is involved in that outreach process to get somebody to accept an assessment. Because accepting a service means you're opening yourself up to be assessed and for mental health or substance abuse. Because most of the time, and if you've done the homeless count, I've done the homeless count, when you go out there, you have a list of questions to ask. The first one is, are you suffering from a mental illness? Most people are going to say no.
Yeah.
Are you taking drugs or do you have an addiction problem? Most people are going to say no. They don't know who you are. Mm-hmm. They don't want you to search their belongings for good reason. Mm-hmm. But are you suffering from a financial hardship? Everybody says yes. But you don't know what the root cause of that financial hardship is. So those that have been evicted or lost their job are generally the ones that are easiest for us to place into affordable housing if we can get them a voucher and connect them with a housing provider. It's the other groups that you need to have that robust outreach. So they're not ready for housing today. Mm-hmm. And so I just think that I have a heart for it. But I also understand how people feel that we can't turn over our public spaces to be outdoor housing because it's not compassionate for anybody. And we have to try to connect people with services, and we can do that. I believe that we are ignoring the resources we already have. We keep talking about what we need. This is an amazing city with a lot of compassionate people, with a lot of nonprofits wanting to help. We have so much access. We have so much at our fingertips that we don't realize we do. And we need to tap into that. We need to tap into the compassion of the landlords. We need to tap into the compassion of the nonprofits, and we need to make them better partners in this city.
For Councilman Rex Richardson, he says the issue is more personal and making the system easier to navigate is key.
My experience at 17 was different than his experience at 17. When he was 17, he got into a fight and he got shot. He got shot in the back at a party, and he was airlifted to Long Beach Memorial Hospital, and that put him on a different trajectory in life. He's dealt with trauma. He's reacted in different ways. And unfortunately, he got involved in drugs. And it's difficult, right? Because you have a loved one that's out there in the streets. Now, over the past, decade or more, we've done our thing as a family. I mean, investing in resources, everything from mental health care and attorneys and all of those things. But the system is difficult to navigate. My brother, again, if it's difficult for me to navigate, I'm an elected official and a regional leader who's engaged in this work. My sister is a national leader on, education, things like that, and an elected official. And if we have a difficult time navigate this process, imagine if you're poor. Imagine if you have a language barrier and you have a brother or sister or aunt that's out there in the street. And so when I think about the mental health crisis and homelessness, I look at it from a personal standpoint of compassion, because if we can figure out how to make the process easier to navigate for people, and we don't give up on people, we can save people's lives. And so, on the campaign, I've talked about this a lot, that we have to build a more robust infrastructure to deal with substance use and mental health issues. Because that's, if you look at our homeless population, about 50% of the people on the streets is associated with something related to poverty.
Right.
Lack of housing, lack of a job. The majority of people in our city are living check to check. That's real. And we can help those people. But the other half, roughly half, are people who have dealt with substance use, mental health issues, or domestic abuse. And those may be more challenging, but we shouldn't lead with a more punitive approach first. We have to think about what capacity we can build to deal with it. About a year ago, I convened the hospitals in the city and some mental health service providers and Cal State Long Beach for a roundtable to ask the question, what aren't we doing? Where do we need to do more? And how can we build a more robust infrastructure? And a lot of good ideas came back. It's like, look, the county is doing a lot. The county funds a lot. What can we do to move some of that here locally? The hospital said, if somebody comes in and they're dealing with an issue, let's say they live in an encampment and they have a cut arm or a cut leg, we can patch them up on their arm. We can patch them up on their leg. But when we let them, after we've done that and they go back out, many times they come right back in the next 48 hours because we didn't patch them up here and we didn't address what's going on here. So what they need is what's called recuperative care. The hospitals call it step-down facilities, where once you've gotten fixed up, you don't go into a hospital bed. You go to a place where you can rest, get back on your meds, sober up, and begin the process of accepting services. We don't have any recuperative care in Long Beach. One hospital mentioned they refer folks out to East LA. So when we talk about a more robust infrastructure to deal with it, we have to acknowledge that we are a big city. We're larger than St. Louis, larger than Miami. Sending folks to East LA is not the answer. So again, when it comes to mental health and homelessness and those issues, I look at it from a personal standpoint.
Yeah. You can see the full interviews with both mayoral candidates on our YouTube page. In addition to the race for mayor, we also have city council races in districts 3, 5, and 9. You can see those debates on our election page at lbpost.com/elections. We also have 5 measures on the ballot, and to break those down, here is our political reporter Jason Ruiz with Measure in a Minute.
Hey Long Beach, I'm Jason Ruiz, the City Hall reporter here at the Long Beach Post, and this is Measure in a Minute.
where I explain the local measures up for a vote this election. Let's look at measures LBC and LBU. They both deal with when the City of Long Beach and the Long Beach Unified School District will hold elections in the future. The city's charter currently says that the city is supposed to hold primary elections in April and runoff elections in June. However, years of low voter turnout and a new state law forced cities like Long Beach into the state cycle, which is June and November in the years we vote for governor, and March and November in the year that we vote for president. A court held that charter cities like Long Beach didn't have to follow the state's schedule, so now the city is asking voters to decide. A yes vote would permanently align our city elections and the LBUSDs with the state. A no vote would require Long Beach to run its own city and school board elections again. The city says that doing so would cost about $1.3 million more per year and would require the city to spend about $2.5 million on new election machines and staff. Let's talk about Measure BB. Long Beach utility users currently get charged for water and sewer services on one monthly bill and natural gas on a separate bill. Measure E is proposing to merge the city's water and gas departments, a move city officials say will make servicing and repairing these systems more efficient because they'll be performed by the same department with employees that have similar skills. It says it could even make service cheaper. Opponents say this is an attempt by the city to transfer more money into the general fund. The city lost a lawsuit earlier this year over its practice of transferring money from the water department to the general fund, but the gas fund was not part of that lawsuit, so the city can continue to make those transfers. A yes vote on Measure BB would create a new public board of utilities that would oversee water and gas operations. A no vote would keep the two utilities separated like they are now. Measure E is probably the most controversial measure on the ballot this year, and it deals with police oversight. Long Beach already has a commission that deals with complaints against the police department, but after decades of criticism over its lack of authority, the city is looking at a new model. A consultant proposed a model that would use an auditor to look at systemic trends in the police department. The old model relied on commissioners reviewing individual cases that were investigated by the commission. The city says this is a step toward more police accountability, while opponents say it would weaken an already weak police accountability system in Long Beach. A yes vote would create a new police oversight commission and cost the city about $900,000 more per year. A no vote would keep the existing commission, which some members of the city council has said it wants to give more funding to make it more effective. The Long Beach Unified School District is asking voters to approve another bond measure that would provide $1.7 billion. The district plans to invest in classroom repairs and other improvements at its campuses. The district estimates that it needs to perform about $3.8 billion in repairs. Measure Q would create this funding by charging property owners $60 for every $100,000 of assessed value. So if your property is valued at $500,000, that means your monthly payment would increase by about $25 if Measure Q passes. Because it is a bond, it requires 55% voter approval to pass. Long Beach voters have approved two other billion-dollar bonds for the school district, and Measure Q would be the third in 15 years. If voters do approve Measure Q, the tax would start being collected next year and run through 2062. A yes vote on Measure Q would raise property taxes to fund school improvements. A no vote on Measure Q would keep property taxes the same, and the district would have to look elsewhere for money. For more information on these measures and other coverage, visit lbpost.com/elections.
Now, hopefully you're following us on our Instagram page and you're already abreast of those measures because you've watched those measures in a minute. But joining me now in person is our political reporter, Jason Ruiz, and he's going to give us a more in-depth analysis of what's going on in this election. And I want to start out with our mayoral race because we've really seen a lot of things come out from both camps as far as, who's different. But when you really break it down and kind of look at how they've voted, they're very similar. So what's the biggest difference between these two candidates?
Well, you're right. I mean, the people at home could probably tell you that, through the election cycle, they've been told that, Susie Price is like Donald Trump, a Trump Republican, which is, it's pretty far-fetched. She is a Democrat, just like Rex Richardson is a Democrat. That there's, when I was writing that profile about the mayor earlier this year, one of the council members said, like the 9-0 vote is the hallmark of the Robert Garcia administration, and that hallmark really makes it hard to like differentiate like candidates. I mean, that was one of the projects I was supposed to work on and never got done, was to examine where they voted differently, and I had a few ideas of what to hone in on, and honestly, there are really only a handful of policies that they really differed on, and maybe that's because the mayor, really, really whips those votes to get that 9-0 mark. But sometimes it's 5-4, and the 5-4 instances were, you saw them in the attack ads, like around the hotel issue where Susie Price voted against this hotel initiative that would have created panic, or would have required panic buttons and work caps as far as how much square footage workers could work in a day. And the reason why she voted no on that, as far as what she told me, is that it was a union driven effort, and there was an opt out where if you unionized, you didn't have to play by those rules. So she didn't think that it was fair that, she saw it as a strong arm tactic to try to get non-union hotels to unionize to avoid these rules that they thought were going to be, arduous and hard to work through. Now, obviously, that's been spun to say that, she doesn't support making safe workspaces for women. And it's obviously, with all attack mailers, there's nuance. I mean, we saw one last week where it said that she supported a guy who said that it was pitiful that, LGBT people could adopt children. And that was a former city council person who said that in 1994. And then in 2017, she said that he was a good harbor commissioner. So I don't know if you'd make that connection, that she was supporting what he said. I think she was saying that he was a good harbor commissioner, and it's on the record that he said abhorrent things about the LGBT community in 1994. But I think we did the math, and Susie Price might have been in college still when that happened. But I mean, the difference between the two, it's come down to the hotel vote. There was a few years ago, Rex Richardson had brought forward this policy that he wanted to. It was a ballot measure where they would have increased property taxes to fund affordable housing in the city. And again, Price was blamed for that falling through, but in reality, it was another council person, former councilman Dee Andrews, who had supported the item going into a Tuesday night, and then all of a sudden his name wasn't on the agenda anymore. I mean, it was on the item as a supporter, and he was the critical vote that, because going in you had 5, and then all of a sudden he retracted his support of it. Did Price play a role in swaying his vote? I don't know that for sure. I mean, that's definitely what's been said, behind the scenes. But those are two of the more controversial votes. So housing and the hotel vote, which obviously, have been, I would say, beaten to death right. over the past few months. But they really do vote similarly. And I don't know if that's, again, because of how the mayor, whips votes behind the scenes. But they're both Democrats, regardless of what people have said or read. They're both Democrats, and they, I don't know. And this is something I wrote about in my newsletter, is that, there's a potential for this like veto-proof majority of like more progressive candidates to take office. And I don't necessarily know what that's going to mean, because there have been the votes over the past years to basically do what this council wants to do. And there's still no rent control in the city. There's still a number of, things that the community has asked for that you would seemingly be more progressive, and they haven't been adopted yet. So is that, I don't know what the difference is between the two of them. I mean, there are some, they definitely see things differently, but I mean, what's the old saying in sports? We both like sports. Is that you are what your record says you are.
Exactly.
And if you're voting for things and you're on the same side of a vote, I mean, you are what your record says you are, right?
Yeah.
So
ball don't lie. Right?
Ball don't lie, unless it's at Lambeau Field.
That is a whole
and the
nother
Cowboys
story.
are getting the catch taken away from them.
Okay, so now we've got Cowboy fans and anybody else in the NFC East who's hating the show. But anyway, we'll move on now, because obviously police accountability it's a big topic, and Measure E is seeking to kind of give more accountability where the Citizens Complaint Commission failed. Do you think this is a good measure? Do you think it will succeed?
Well, let's be certain to say that it's not about what I think. It's it's about what people are saying.
It's about your analysis.
Right. So I mean, the CPCC, going back to the people who founded it, I've written a story about this, and I mean, and even two contemporary commissioners have complained that it doesn't have the power that they thought that it would have, and then they found out that they had power that they hadn't been exercising, which was subpoena power. And it's basically you have, I forget how many are there. I think there's 13 commissioners who they get to review these complaints in closed doors, and they get to make recommendations on the findings like, yes, we think Officer X did something wrong and he should be disciplined for it. But the problem that commissioners have found in the community is that the ultimate power rests with the city manager. So you could have these commissioners who vote unanimously to say that, you know, this officer should be disciplined, something should be done, he did something wrong, he or she did something wrong, and the city manager more often than not says the opposite and overturns these decisions. So with the new proposed plan, proposed model, they would still have the commissioners, but they wouldn't be doing these, they wouldn't be reviewing these cases behind closed doors like they do now, and they wouldn't be doing these parallel investigations like they do now. They have their own investigators where they investigate parallel to the police department's internal investigations unit. That wouldn't happen anymore. There would be an auditor monitor. We'll just say auditor because I don't know how many times I can say auditor monitor together, and the auditor would be basically looking at like systemic trends. So like the commission's job would be partially like public relations, to like get out and tell the community like what the commission is doing, and then also to recommend to the auditor saying like, you should look at how tight the police officers are putting their cuffs on people, or like, you know, are they turning their, I'm making things up, but you know, are they turning on their body worn cameras all the time when they should be, when they're exiting their cars? And they would examine that and then like issue reports at the end of the year. They would have the ability to be on scene at like major use of force incidents. If the police chief or like, you know, somebody higher up in the department is alleged to have done something wrong, they can investigate that only if the city manager asks them to. So that's a big, I mean, the city manager is still going to be a gatekeeper in this new proposal. And again, the end person at this new process, the city manager would still be in charge of handing out any kind of punishment, right? So critiques of, well, the city says that this is going to be a better plan because the auditor is going to have access to these documents that the commissioners have never had access to. So there's more transparency. The community and people who are against, people in the community who are against this and say it's going to be worse, say, well, you're going to have another bureaucrat that's hired by the city council to be the auditor. So the city council gets to hire and fire the auditor, and the commissioners don't get to be as hands-on as they were before because they're not actually going through the complaints. And they just think that it's going to cost more money. I think they said it's about, off the top of my head, I think it's like $1 million a year to pay for this new auditor position. And so some city council members, depending on what happens with this measure, whether it passes or it fails, some city council members are like, why don't we just take that $1 million and give it to the current commission? Because one of the biggest complaints is that these investigators don't have enough time or resources to like thoroughly look into all these hundreds of complaints that they get every year. So like maybe hire some more investigators and they could do a better job investigating. So if E passes, the city's already said it's going to take a while to implement it. So the CPCC is still going to be here for another year maybe, or year and a half. It depends on, because with any time with employee unions, especially the police union, they have to have like the meet and confer process where they like hammer out like, this is how this is going to work now, and then they have to vote on it and stuff like that, and then they actually have to go through and hire an auditor monitor and change the whole model. So it's going to be a minute before this gets implemented. And then if it doesn't, there's still the possibility that the city council could just give more funding to the current model to do better investigations.
Right. Accountability is a big thing, and I'm not sure how Measure E improves that.
Right. I mean, one could say it doesn't, because you're still ending with the city manager having the final say on if there is officer discipline, and all of the state laws that shield police officers' records and shields them from having to show up for when they're subpoenaed to talk about something that they maybe did wrong. Like, those things are still going to be in place, even with Measure E passes. So I don't think that this is the silver bullet to improving police accountability. And I don't, the city leaders, especially the mayor, during the height of the protests after George Floyd was murdered, they pointed to the CPCC and said, like, that's what we're going to fix. So I don't know if this was like, they just wanted something to
make a quick fix.
Right. Well, I mean, they promised the community that they were going to address police accountability, and they pointed to the CPCC. And I don't know that this is the cure.
Right.
And it definitely suffered from like not having a lot of input from the community. I mean, I went to one of these communities, like the microphone was broken. There were like 12 people there, and they only had 2 sessions. One was online, and the only in-person one was in East Long Beach, which is like, I mean, if generally speaking, like, that's a little bit more a part of the city that doesn't really have the maybe same interactions as people on the west side and North Long Beach and Central have, and don't have the same opinions toward the police department. I mean, it was great. It was walking distance from my house.
Right.
I walked to it, but I mean, I don't, it was kind of excluded, hopefully on accident, people who probably needed to be more part of the process from being part of the process, because it was, if you didn't have the internet or didn't have a good enough connection, couldn't go to the first meeting. And if you couldn't get a ride to, the other side of Signal Hill to go to Browning High School, you also couldn't go to that meeting. And I know for sure that not a lot of people were there. Yeah,
that's unfortunate. So we're going to keep you updated throughout the evening, so make sure you stay with us. Follow us on our Instagram page for sure. If you are a last-minute voter for any reason, make sure you check out our elections page at lbpost.com/election, and we will be here with you all night. Once again, I'm Jackie Ray, and thanks for staying with us on the Long Beach Post Election Night 2022.